Hello my lovelies, so this is Lizzie from Love From Lizi, and today I'm bringing you the Love From Lizi July 2018 10 cards 1 kit video. So first up, I'm just starting to show you how I make my card bases. I make them all in exactly the same way in this card video, so it's all nice and straightforward, and I've just edited it out of all of my other cards. So I'm showing you in the first, I quite simply split my card using my trimmer and then use my bone folder using the rule on the trimmer to make that crease down the centre of the card. And for my first card, I thought I would start off with one of the decoupage sheets. So this month I've tried something different once again, and all I'm doing here is popping out all of the pieces of decoupage on this particular sheet, and then I'm using the foam squares that came in the kit and starting to layer them all up. So for the tiny weeny little pieces, I'm just using my non-stick scissors just to snip some of those pieces down a little bit, because they've then all got exactly the same depth. If you start using like really skinny strips, they may be a little bit deeper, a little bit shorter, and then you won't get the same effect. So I've removed all the backing pieces. Please excuse my head, it does make quite a few appearances through this video. And then you just line it up on top. So here's the second piece, and I've also popped another piece up on top, and so on until it's all done. And there were a few little of these knobbly bits still sticking out from where I popped them out, so I just ran around with my scissors and just trimmed those bits off. Here I've taken a piece of the pattern paper from the kit, and I've just trimmed it down to size so that I've got like a belly band to run across the middle of my card. And then all I do is add some ribbon. Now, because I knew that my topper was going to go on the front, I didn't have to worry about how pretty it was. So I've just popped some double-sided sellotape at the top and the bottom of that seam. And then I just, quite simply, I've cut 2 lengths of the yellow ribbon. I lay them flat inside the card. And then I'm folding one end into the sellotape. And then I will just double check it is flat on the inside, because that will show, and then fold the other side in. I did that for both the top and the bottom. And here I'm putting some double-sided tape on the back of my decoupage, and I just centre that in the middle of the front of the card. And now I've taken one of the tiny weeny little shells from the stamp set, and I'm just using my Versa Mark ink pad, and I just rotate it each time and follow all the way around. So that was card 1. Here we are on to card 2, and here I'm trying something new to me, which is Leslie of Heffy Doodle's new post-it tape. And it's great because I wanted to use it for some masking, and it's got a really nice width to it. So I've just taken the sentiment stamp that I want to use and measured a piece out and torn it off with the applicator it comes with. And here I'm going to show how the never-ending stamp works. So I've lined it up in my Misty tool, and I'm using some antique linen distress oxide ink, and I give it a real good inking up and then flip it over and press down really firmly. I did this a couple of times just to make sure that it was really good and impressed well. And you saw me there cleaning my stamp. Usually I don't show that, but because of this technique where you're having to sort of drag it around on your cardstock to make sure it's lined up perfectly, you want your stamp to be clean, because otherwise you'll get impressions everywhere. So I have then just moved it up, lined it up, because this is a never-ending pattern on this stamp. So you are able to just keep stamping, just keep moving it, and it will all line up. And it's the joy of having a clear stamp for this technique. But all I'm doing is lay it down, and then sort of like tip the sides up, just to make sure that all the little lines are marrying up onto the right sides of what I've already stamped. And so I had to twist my cardstock here to make it fit within the Misty, because it's quite a big stamp. It's a 4x4 inch stamp. And here now, whilst the post-it tape is still in place, I've just taken an ink blending tool, a mini tool, and I'm just putting some extra colour just to accentuate that seam around where the post-it tape was. Then I've peeled it back, and voila. So, and now I'm stamping my sentiment. I really wanted to do a single layer card, because I know a lot of people that watch these videos are in the US, and it keeps shipping nice and cheap. So, but creating something that looks like it's got dimension on a single layer is not always very easy. So here I've just run some normal double-sided sellotape around that edge, the frame area that I've created, and here I'm using the sands that came in the kit. And I do this technique quite often with glitter. So and all I do is I just tipped it over the top, and then I'm using my finger just to rub it in and give it a really good firm press. and then I stamp another one of the little shells just at the bottom of the sentiment, again using the antique linen oxide, and that's card 2 finished. So now we're on to card 3, and of course I put my sequins in my kit, so there has to be a shaker card. So I've used a few sort of quite basic shaped dies here, and then I've pinched a sentiment from one of the decoupage sheets, and this is just to show you that you don't have to follow the instructions on the decoupage sheet. You can obviously use it as you see fit. So I've cut a card panel, and then I've cut a circle from that, and I've put some foam adhesive on the back of the sentiment. I'm here attaching some acetate to the reverse side of my patterned paper, and I'm now using some very skinny strips of Scotch mounting tape, which I've doubled up and then cut into very thin little strips. I show this in a lot of my videos. The thinner it is, the easier it is to manipulate round in that circle. Here I've just filled the rest of the back in, because obviously it is a paper stock, it's not quite so sturdy, so it's nice to have a good strong coverage on the back with foam tape. I've put some of the sequin mix into the centre of the card, so that when I lay the card front down on top, the sequins will be in place, rather than trying to put the card front to the patterned paper and not knowing where it's going to end up. I attach my little sentiment onto the front in the centre, and then I'm taking my little wooden ice cream cone that also came in the kit and just attaching that slightly off to the right, and that's my card. So a very simple shaker. Now we're on to card 4. This is again me wanting to show you that there is more than one way that you can use these decoupage sheets, and this was one of the pieces, and I really liked the frame from it, so I stole it. So I just used my my craft knife just to snip that bit out. And then on this pattern paper, it's all little strips of bunting, which I thought was really cute. So I did start off with 2. You will see me cut another 2 later on. But I just wanted to create sort of like some stripes of bunting to go across the back, as if they were hanging in rows. And as I say, I started out with 2, but then as the card developed, I decided to put more in. And then I run a peel off along the top, so what the bunting is hanging from is now glittery. Naturally, pink and glittery, how can you go wrong? I flip the card base over, and I use the edge of the card to trim off the excess. And here you're just seeing me cutting down some of those foam squares, so they're nice and skinny, and they go on that frame that I've trimmed from the decoupage page. I work my way all around the edge, and then I've taken one of the ephemera pieces from the embellishment bag. I've put some foam squares on, and where it's going to overlap with that frame, because that's already got foam on it, I just use some glossy accents just to make sure it attaches nicely. Position it how it is that I want, and give it a little push to make sure it goes down well. And here are those extra 2 strips that I decided to add on. And I'm just using the lines on my grid mat just to give me a rough idea. I do, largely speaking, eyeball the majority of my things, which doesn't make them exactly perfect, but it's a handmade card after all, so I don't feel bad. Okay, so I'm just removing all of the millions of little bits of release tape from the back of my topper piece now. And then I flip it over, and I use my tweezers because I find it much easier when my big fat fingers aren't in the way. And then I give that a nice good firm press down. And then there is also a sentiment on that same decoupage sheet. I pop some foam up on the back of that, and I did have a little toy as to where to put it, as in on the ring or at the top of the beach hut, but I did end up going with towards the bottom. And then I just used some glossy accents to go over the sentiment, and also over the doorknob, the little heart, and the bunting that is on the beach hut, just to give it a little bit of something special. But this is a really cute sort of, it is very pink and white, so it's very girly, and yeah, I think there'll be somebody very happy to receive that kind of a card. Okay, next one. So this one took quite a long time to make. I used a sheet of Bristol Strathmore smooth cardstock because I wanted to use my zigs, but I wanted to show you that this stamp can be used without a MISTI tool. So if you don't have a MISTI tool, we are not excluding you. So what I've got here is a CD case. I've really gone old school with doing this card, so bear with me. I'm using some black ink. This particular one wasn't very juicy, so it wasn't necessarily the best one because you can't re-stamp it quite so easily. However, I've made it work. So I've given it a real good firm press, and then I'm using the backing sheet from the stamp set, and I'm lining it up so that it matches perfectly with the pattern. So I hope that makes sense. And it does take a minute or two of fussing, but I do get it exactly where it's supposed to be. And then I lay the stamp down exactly on top, And then I just grab a couple of things from my craft desk. So I've got my Xyron sticker maker and my painter's tape. Then I take them both away, I peel off the acetate, I ink up my stamp again, and this is the sorcery part. I hold the tape and the Xyron down, and then I just line that CD case back in and push down. Now before I pull my CD case back up, I make sure that the Xyron machine and the tape are still in place, because if I didn't get a very good impression, I can ink it up and I can stamp it again. So that just shows that you don't have to have any sort of fancy equipment to make it possible for you to use this never-ending stamp. So here I'm colouring it. Now this is super sped up to 6 times real time. So what you see is about 20 minutes colouring, and I use 2 different colours per object, and so all the starfish are coloured the same, all of this particular rounded seashell are the same, and the spiral seashell are all the same. And yeah, it is just a selection of my Zig markers, and I am no fancy colourist, I just do it for fun. And I really like how this came out, because I left quite a lot of hard lines in it, and I think I often get tempted to overwork when I'm colouring and try to make things perfect, to make them look realistic. But sometimes I think it is really nice just to leave some brush strokes in there and to make it a little bit authentic. So I'm just working my way around. I will take this moment to remind everybody that today is usually the last day for add-on orders, but because in England we're not in the office printing the orders until 9 o'clock in the morning, you've got until 9 o'clock British summertime on the 26th, which is tomorrow. So, you know, there's not long left. There's only like a handful of hours, but you're more than welcome if you're wanting to do that. There's also, tomorrow is the last day for adding your entries into the Love From Lizi monthly card kit challenge, monthly card challenge, I apologise. And this month it's Show Us Your Stripes. So any cards, can be any products. Obviously you're more than welcome to use mine. But if you've got a card that you think would be perfect for it, enter the challenge. It's a random selection winner, so you could be brand new to crafting, or you could have been crafting for 100 years. Everybody's in with the same chance, and the winner will get a gift certificate to the Love From Lizi store. So it's well worth having a go. Anyway, right, so now I'm moving on to the next element, and I've just taken a banner die. I've cut a piece of vellum, and I'm using my anti-static powder tool. And here I am going to stamp the shell and the Let's Celebrate sentiment, but because of the width of the banner I could have cut my stamp, which quite a lot of people like to do, but I get a little bit precious because this is my stamp. I think I don't want to mess with it, so I've just inked up the Celebrate first. I'm lining it up using my grid mat, and then I wipe off with my finger the Celebrate and I just ink up the Let's. Now, because of the nature of vellum, some of the Celebrate did come off, but I just used a paintbrush and it wasn't a problem. And here I've stamped the shell. I'm using Love From Lizi Golden Crown embossing powder, and here you'll see me just knocking off that last little bit of embossing powder that snuck on where it wasn't wanted. And then I heat set that, and I'm so in love with this embossing powder. It's fantastic. It did comprise as part of the May card kit, but it is now available for individual purchase in the shop. I've, from my stamped patterned piece, used a large die cut banner, and then I just attached that onto the specialty cardstock card base. And then here I'm using some multimedia matte, which that bottle has been wanting to die on me for I don't know how long, but it just keeps going when I just dip a spatula in, so whilst it still goes, it goes. That stuff goes a long way. I've just put it behind the embossing so it doesn't show through, and that is the end of card 5. Probably my favourite, I think. I really do like that one. Card 6. So this isn't ever such a simple card. It started life as one card and it ended up as another. So all I've taken is a piece of patterned paper. I've used my crocodile to chomp the corners on the patterned paper and the cardstock. And I've taken one of the pieces of the decoupage just to use as a piece of ephemera. I'm using some foam squares on the back just to give it a little bit of dimension, and then I take some of the, it's like a very pale blue, tealy coloured ribbon to tie around. Now, because this is a paper stock, it does move quite a bit as you tie it, so I did pop a little bit of tape on the back. I use painter's tape because no one will see it. And then I just tied the bow, and then I removed all of the foam adhesive release papers and popped my little mice with ice cream on the front there. And then I did go over the ice cream just in glossy accents, again, just to give it a little bit of shine. It's ever such a simple card, and this works obviously with any kind of design on top. I did leave it without a sentiment as well, intentionally, because it gives me the freedom that if I just want to send a note to a friend, it hasn't got to be for a specific reason. And then I just use my Nuvo drops in the corners, and I'm dreadful for this. I think I'll just do it in the corners, and then I think, oh, and then I'll just do one in the middle, and then, oh, I'll just do one, and it goes on, and I managed to stop myself here at this point, so I'm quite proud of myself with that. I'm growing. Okay, right, card 7. So here I wanted to use the stencil a little bit, so I've got my my Ranger mixed media mat, and I've taped my card base folded in half onto the front of it, so that I don't get the back all messed up. And then I just use a little bit of painter's tape again to hold the stencil in place, and I'm using the tonic Glimmer paste, and it is the moon dust, so it's like an iridescent. It's not white, but the glitter is iridescent, so it almost looks white when it's in the jar. And as you'll see with the spatula, I'm working it up, down, left, right, diagonal, down, diagonal, up. I am working it into every little crevice, and then after I've got a nice big thick layer down, I'm really scraping the spatula across the top to remove any excess, and then it also means that all of your bubbles are going to be nice and level. So here you see I'm just scraping it over, removing all the extra, and then when I peel it up, we have bubbles. And I'm dreadfully impatient when I'm making a card. I'm not very good at starting one and then leaving, so this was quite a challenge for me. But here you'll see me just going around the edge of the card to make sure there's not any bits that overhang, because I think that looks really nasty. So it's a very simple process, but whilst it's still wet, very easy. So I saw where I wanted to lay my stencil, but I touched it and it was still wet, so I had to come back a little while later. Thankfully it was quite a hot evening when I was doing this card, so it didn't take too long. And then I've just repositioned my stencil, and I have turned it so that it doesn't end up looking like a never-ending pattern. I wanted it to look organic, so, and I just do exactly the same thing again here, and then up in the top corners again, letting it dry, then coming back, reattaching it with tape. I think attaching it with tape was crucial for me, because I'm the sort of person that I jog, and then it will lose the effect and it will drag glitter all over your card base. So you know, if you can tape it down or fix it somehow, I think you can get like repositionable adhesive as well if you prefer that. But tape works fine for me. I'm not very heavy-handed, so it works wonders. So I've created here a little background, if you like, for one of my pieces of ephemera from the kit, and I've just used that sentiment that was from that first decoupage sheet that I started creating with. I've run some double-sided tape along the bottom, because it was thankfully a really good colour match to the sentiment, so I've just used some double-sided tape, attached that on, and here I've taken one of the little wooden pieces, which is a little seashell, and I've pushed it into the antique linen just to give it a universal colour across the front, so it still looks wooden. And here I'm using some Blueprint Sketch oxide ink, just to dab along the edges, just to give it a little bit of pop. Pop some double-sided foam squares onto the reverse of the ephemera piece that has the sentiment attached. Took all the backers off, and then I couldn't decide about which orientation, but I ended up going with landscape and towards the bottom. So then I popped some glossy accents on the back of the wood veneer, because glossy accents is a fantastic glue and it's not going to go anywhere once it's dried. I did then get my Spectrum Noir sparkle pen, but do be warned, if you do this over oxide, do wipe your pen off afterwards, because it does reactivate it. And then some glossy accents, and that was that. So here is now card 8, and here you'll see me just cut a piece of the specialty pearlescent white cardstock, and this is the last piece of my spotty patterned paper. I used that whole sheet up making these cards, and I'm using a large circle die, and I just cut a piece of ephemera, and I cut apart the red card base so that I had a card front. And here I'm sticking the pearlescent specialty cardstock in the middle, and then I dress either side with red, and then positioning one of the decoupage sheets on the front of the card panel, I work out where I would like the circle die to cut from, and then I just use some painter's tape, hold it down, run it through the big shot. Now this bit is, you know, it worked really well. So I've lined up the card panel with my card base, and I've got the sellotapes just so that it is sticking on the inside of the circle. So it's all lined up, I've stuck my die down, and then I've peeled the panel away, and now I have got two pieces cut with the circle in exactly the same place. Here you're seeing me run some glossy accents all over that card front there, and I'm going to lay my circle of acetate within it. Give it a nice little press, make sure it's all stuck down nicely the whole way around. Nobody wants a flappy piece of acetate. And then I pop some extra glue on the reverse side of my card front, and I sandwich the acetate between the two. And then I line up the largest piece of decoupage, so the base piece, through the circle, and then I flip it over and open it so that it's laying exactly the right place. I use some painter's tape that I've really neutralised on my hand a lot, so it will hold it, but it's not super secure. Put some double-sided sellotape on the reverse of the first piece of decoupage, and then I simply close my card over. And then when I open it, that first piece of tape is really easy to get up, and the second piece, because double-sided sellotape is stronger than the painter's tape, it just pings up. So now I have got that positioned perfectly, and I'm now starting to pop out all of the rest of the pieces on this decoupage page. And now that they're all out, on the largest, second largest I should say, number 2, I'm using some glossy accents. This will be exposed on the inside of the card, but I'm hoping that'll be forgiven because it's a very cute little card. So I close the acetate over and push the card front down to make sure it's in the right place, and I line the little beach huts up over the top. Here I'm putting some foam pieces all over the back, and I support even those tiny weeny little skinny bits because I don't want them to sag if I put it through the post. Then once I've removed all the backers, I then line that up directly over the top, and then so on for all the other tiny little pieces as well as the sentiment. They all just go to their little homes. I think the best rule of thumb, if you've lost your numbers or you're out of sync, you work from the largest piece to the smallest piece. So there we go. That is card number 8 done. Card number 9, I'm using what turned out to be a window die. I thought it would just cut out this shape for me, but it didn't. So first time with that one. So I'm just using my craft knife because there is a gully in this die. So you could use a knife if you're not happy to trust. And here I'm using the inside portion of what I've just die cut out to cut a piece of patterned paper. I need it to be ever so slightly smaller than that die cut piece so that it sits behind and there's no bits poking out of the edges. And here I'm using some of my Scotch mounting tape, which I've folded in half to double up in height, and I'm cutting some super skinny strips. I cut one width of the thin tape into 5, so they're ever so thin. And this being because I wanted to support my frame in a 3D fashion. So I just run along all of the inside pieces because they're the pieces that will sag. You could have run the die through with some fun foam. However, fun foam can stretch and warp a little bit, so I just went with this. Okay, so I've attached that onto my pink pearlescent base. And here you're seeing me, I've chosen 6 of my little wooden pieces. I'm pushing them into the antique linen just to make them a nice uniform colour. And it is a very close match to the colour that they naturally are anyway. And then I'm popping a little bit of glossy accents on the back, and I'm filling each of the windows. So now, here I'm creating the backdrop, and I have got some Tattered Rose oxide, and I'm just using a little mini finger dauber, and I'm stenciling through. There is no technique to this, it is just a case of filling in the holes, and I run through in this direction, going from the bottom left up, and then once that's all nice and full up, I go back in, and when you tape one corner down, you can lift it in check, and it is really obvious if you missed it. And then I flip my card the other way up, so that I'm then doing sort of the other corner, the opposing corner, and I do the same thing again. And I have got the antique linen there. I was umming and ahhing about doing something different, but I just stuck with what I knew. And here I've used evergreen bow oxide just to stamp the sentiment, and because it was the first time I was using this ink, I wanted to make sure it came out the colour I wanted it to. And so I've just stamped "Let's Celebrate" at the bottom, and that's the end of that card. So On to the final card now, card number 10. I have cut a strip of it's almost like a beach towel patterned paper. It's just an inch width, and then I'm sticking this on a white card base, a little bit off to the left. I had to flip it over to trim off the excess, and then it was these little animals on the beach chairs. I think they're so very cute. And I've cut a strip of that, and then I'm using a circle die to cut this. It's like a little beach scene. There's loads of little critters all over the sand. And I've also cut from the waist of that other card a small white circle. And I'm taking the sentiment, happiness comes in waves, using the Broken China oxide ink because that matched quite well to the blue that was in the patterned paper. And then along this strip that I've popped on the front, I'm just running peel-offs along either edge. I do also do that for the belly band, the one that runs from left to right. And after I attach that, sorry, I'm jumping ahead on myself here, getting a bit keen. And so yeah, pop that down using the lines on my grid mat to make sure I'm nice and straight. Flip it over to trim the extra off. Run a peel off at the top and the bottom. It just gives it that very finished look. I did cut those pieces with the trimmer, so they were nice lined, but the peel offs just give it a pop. Then I popped some of the foam squares from the kit onto the back of the circle. Popped some more onto the tiny circle with the sentiment, and then I use my tweezers, because again it's a nice small circle, to see exactly where I want it. I pop that down, and then this is one of my methods of attaching sequins. I dab a load of glue and then I just grab sequins, so it's a lot of fun doing it that way. And that completes card 10. So please let me know which is your favourite. I have obviously got some leftovers, so I've kept those waist decoupage sheets because there is still some printing on there, so they could work, but there are still 5 full sheets of decoupage, 2 that have been completed and 1 that's still got partial. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 unused sheets and 5 partial sheets of the patterned paper left. There is half a red card base, and these are just some extras, but this is all the specialty now that's left, so there's still 3 good portions of specialty. I've got lots of peel-offs. Obviously the stamp and stencil are stash building, so there it was forever. Then I have a whole sheet of foam squares and then a few extras. I've got plenty of sequins. I've got lots of sand still. I didn't even use my bunting or my beach hut ribbon. Still plenty of the skinny ribbons as well. I've got 4 shells and a wood veneer. I've still got my beach hut wood veneer. My die I didn't even get to use. 2 ephemera pieces and my Nouveau drops. So additional supplies. So it's the usual suspects. A lot of tools as opposed to additional crafting products, I like to think. So there's some Nouveau. There's my zigs. Obviously I used quite a few oxides this month. Sparkle pen, there's my ATG, the corner chomper, some acetate and some vellum, my Heffy Doodle little tape roll, a couple of ink pads, and quite a lot of dies, but they're all quite staple shaped dies, so I'm hoping that you have something similar, or that you can just cut those sort of shapes by hand. Obviously my CD case, and then tweezers, bone folder, pencil, mini ink dauber, my T-square ruler, scissors, Scotch foam tape, stamp chamois. So hopefully nothing that is obviously there's my big shot and my heat tool as well, so hopefully nothing too extravagant there, and nothing that beyond what you have. Please do let me know which is your favourite card. I think mine is the stamped banner card, but here are the still shots, and the design team will be following up with their 10 cards 1 kit videos very soon. I'm very excited to see everybody else's interpretation of this kit. Have a look at the blog challenge, see if it's something that you're interested in, and until next time, thanks ever so much for sticking with me this long, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Do take care, and a very happy paper crafting. Thank you, lovelies. Bye!